host as always. And yes, I'm enjoying a cup of coffee through my new Aiwyn branded mug. Sam Baker, thank you. And our guest, Terrell Turner, has one as well. Looking good, Terrell. What are you sipping on today? You an afternoon coffee guy? What are you working with?
Today I'm drinking some soda water. I'm trying to train for like a marathon and force myself to drink more water. So I'm like, soda water gives me a little break from the just flat water.
I'm right there with you. It's been a long day, so I'm on coffee number 2 at this point. But all right, well, listen, for those who don't know, Terrell with the TL Turner Group, a friend of Aiwyn and a real thought leader and expert in advising law firms and accounting firms. And as we got to know each other, there's no one better we'd want to have around the water cooler. So Terrell, for those who don't know you, why don't you take a minute? You want to introduce yourself? Tell us about kind of your firm and the work that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is accounting and finance, and did that for years of working with various companies, and just decided like, hey, I want to take those skills and help small businesses or in medium-sized businesses. And I think I started a podcast, started interviewing a lot of different business owners, figuring out, okay, what type of business owner do I really want to help? And after working with several different law firms and doing some consulting, kind of helping them streamline some of their processes, I realized like, hey, law firms are a organization. I understand it because I am an accounting firm and law firms function very similar. It's just that a lot of lawyers didn't understand the financial side or the processes they need to have in place on that side of their business. So we provide bookkeeping and CFO services for law firms, and we do work with other kind of service-based businesses as well.
Love it. Well, for those who have been to the water cooler before, you know why we become fast friends with Terrell, because as we started out, Aiwyn working with CPA firms. Many of you have heard the story. We started getting a lot of phone calls from law firms, seeing what we were doing with their peers in the professional services space. So we've continued to grow in a similarly kind of organic fashion. And again, for those who've been here with us before, we take a technology bent around this water cooler. So Terrell, you get to see a lot of different firms. And obviously you have a tech aptitude of your own. Change isn't easy. Introducing new technology isn't easy. I'm curious to ask you in particular, from your experience, what are the biggest misconceptions that firms have as you try to introduce kind of tech-driven change, and how have you kind of learned to help them kind of adapt and flourish in the midst of that tech and change management piece?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take it from two perspectives. I mean, I think on a overly optimistic side, and then kind of what are some of the misconception on the pessimistic side. Whereas on the optimistic side, a lot of times I hear people say, oh, this new technology is going to solve all of our problems, and they don't even have like a process in place. So I'm just like, so this technology is just going to come in and fix all of that, is what they're thinking. And I'm like, I'm like, that's probably not going to happen. There's some stuff you do need to have, that this process is going to enhance. And then I think on the other end is where I meet some people that think that, oh, the learning curve and the technology is going to be too long. It's going to disrupt too much of my business, to where they don't necessarily see the technology as an opportunity to enhance their business. They see it as something like, this is going to compete with everything we do, and it's just going to change everything and ruin the way we run our business.
It's a polar view, right? And the truth is, of course, that fun, productive, messy middle where actual change and progress occurs. So that even just framing it in that context, I'm sure is in a productive education in a lot of ways. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, because I think that a lot of people, I mean, you never know which perspective people are coming from, when they're looking at technology. Like I said, on the pessimistic spectrum, they're thinking about technology in terms of like, the Terminator, where it's like, hey, when when the internet went, or whenever the system went live, it was just like, hey, it was an attack on the humans. And then you have on the other end, they're thinking about technology and like, they probably grew up watching the Jetsons, where it's like technology fixed everything, to where they can just sit back and just let the technology do all the work. But I think it's more of a, process and a collaboration. And I always tell them technology enhances what you're able to do manually. It just allows you to be able to do it more efficiently, effectively, and more consistently.
So, okay, yeah, we are of similar philosophical mind, because in fairness to the folks who have a glass half full perception of new tech and apply what's often rightly placed scrutiny, it's coming from an honest place, because you've been around long enough. Some of these firms, they've had those really subpar vendors who under delivered, and in many ways Iowans come in as a course correction to some of those bad experiences with vendors who came kind of before us. So I get that, and I agree. And this has transcended some of my past companies as well in other professional spaces, other industries outright. Technology is kind of the enabler, the unlocker of kind of the highest aptitudes in human creativity and professional certification that folks have. It's, can we save people from 2-3 days a week of the monotonous stuff that actually kind of liberates them to focus at the highest end of their aptitude. And that's as high up on my soapbox as I'll get today. That's an underpinning of kind of the mission that we have at Aiwyn. So something I'm curious, because you're in rare air, because you have an accounting background, you work with a lot of law firms, you also work with a range of firms. Accounting firms and law firms, I work with both. They'll often assume they're very different from each other. I see a lot of connective tissue, particularly around the challenges they seem to share. I'm curious your observations. What's similar, what's different in the professional spaces, and what could each group learn from one another, perhaps?
Yeah, definitely. I think that there are a ton of similarities. I mean, after doing some consulting with like 30 different, well, it's been 32 different law firms, and just really studying their processes in and out, trying to help them fix some things, I realized like a lot of the same problems you have, or a lot of the same problems I have, or a lot of my peers, because I also host a podcast of interviewing other firm owners, and I've talked to 75 different firm owners. So I'm like, the problems are there's a lot in common, then there are some unique things. The things that I would say are in common is just, that both require a high level of trust in developing a relationship with a client. I mean, trust is a huge currency. If you lose it, or if your processes, start to hurt that opportunity to build trust, you're going to lose that client, or that client's going to go elsewhere. And I think that's something we definitely share in common. And I do think also is we bring a skill that people are coming to us because they can't do it themselves, or it's like in their mind, they perceive that, hey, this isn't something I can do myself. So I'm heavily reliant on you. So there is this exceptional level of expertise that we bring to the table. And then I do think, like I said, as far as the work, like a lot of firms are trying to figure out, whether it's accounting or law firms, like how do we transition from doing billing by the hour to how do we bill flat rate, or, and how do we focus on, managing our cash flow? How do we focus on, collections? Like those are very similar things that both are dealing with. Now, where the differences come in is, I think that law firms, their profit margins tend to be a lot higher. I mean, I would say from, compared to accounting firms, law firms bring in a lot of cash. Now, where I have seen a difference is that law firms often tend to forget to invoice, or forget to follow up on their outstanding invoices.
Yeah.
And I think, they can live through it because their margins are so high. So they don't really run into cash problems as quickly as an accounting firm. And I think just accountants, because, AR is part of their, is part of the mindset of an accountant. They're probably a little bit more diligent than a law firm. They're not the most diligent. They're just a little bit more diligent than law firms. But I do think, for across the board, both of them, there is a huge opportunity for them to really manage their cash flow better, look at those opportunities of how do we fix this and automate this a little more.
Well, you're speaking our language. I mean, we sit right at that intersection of billing, AR, and candidly, that was our observation even before we started the business as clients of big law and CPA firms. And it's interesting how, that trust component you spoke to, I think is crucial, particularly as a boon for these firms as we enter what could be a pretty challenging economy for an extended period of time, that they're well anchored to weather that storm pretty well. But it's interesting how even a slightly disjointed experience can potentially change kind of perception of that trust. I mean, as again, one of the impetuses for us starting Aiwyn is we had a bad billing experience with a really great CPA firm. They did some wonderful work for us through a really kind of big inflection point in our previous business. 4 months later, I think we got the bill, for services rendered, and we had to write a check. We said something's broken here, and it did frankly color our perception a little bit of that firm. And we told this story a lot to our clients, but the inverse is also true. Friction removal, heightened attunement to client experience can actually enhance trust. Now, I think the cash flow piece, and we've observed this as well because we're growing really quickly, I think, as firms anticipate this, that cash flow governance and stewardship is going to become more important over the next kind of 12, 18 months in particular. And you're right. I've seen a difference in maybe maturity is the right word, maybe just hyper focus, where some law firms aren't as attuned to it as some of the CPA firms we work with. But I think everyone's starting to now focus on, okay, this is an area where maybe we can expect some outward pressure as felt by our clients related to things like billing and fees and rates. And they want to start to kind of prepare for what might be some challenging times ahead. And fortunately, folks like you and systems like ours are kind of positioned to help them do that. So,
yeah. And I agree. I mean, I do think that, yeah, one of the things I tell clients is, with the economy heating up and, their cash flow may not flow as easily as it has in the past. Yeah. Your access to cash or, third-party sources of cash may not be as readily available. And one of the first things you want to look at is, first is, are you actually billing your clients for the work that you're doing? And I think a lot of accounting firms and law firms get, fall into trouble with this because, that they're hired to provide a technical, skill. They really are a little weak on managing the business side of their firm, and sending out those invoices is part of it. And then having a follow-up process for what's outstanding is another part that I think that they're trying to learn to wrap their mind around. And so I definitely tell them is when things get tight in the economy, you want to make sure you're doing everything possible to protect and enhance your cash flow from the people you're already doing work for, is making sure you're asking them to pay you and you're following up, because that's going to be huge to make it through any crunch in the economy or any pressure that the economy brings on.
I totally agree. And it's funny. I'm real, I think, personally considerate of it, because I think, we've talked about this kind of outside of the water cooler. I think kind of, frankly, that lack of oversight of it, or some of the friction that firms have in that management, comes from a really considerate kind of client-centric place. They are focused on the service delivery and the stewardship of the client's interests. And I've had a lot of partners say, listen, billing is both one of the most difficult and also one of the most intimate things I do. That's that point of, hey, this is now the dollar sign attached to the worth I've delivered to you. And nobody likes making collections calls and those reminders to, hey, you forgot to pay that bill, which is why process is kind of, you're an expert in, and kind of helping them set up and almost preempt what would be downstream collections issues. And then kind of intelligent mitigation solutions like ours that basically automate that for them. That 1-2 punch can be really valuable. The thing I wanted to ask you, and this will be a good one to close on, because this is the water cooler. We got to get back to work, I guess. I know you're busy. It might be a challenging economy. Certainly a lot of firms are telling us they're starting to kind of see indications of that as heard by their clients. We talked a little bit about the opportunity to kind of get one's house in order. What would you envision are some of the challenges? And what is the opportunity as we head into a difficult economy for firms, maybe beyond cash flow, just in general, or specifically to cash flow? Is that kind of the area where firms can really insulate their interests? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the first things I think is internally, when it comes down to your people, because if the economy is tight for your business, that probably means it's tight for the people you employ in your business. And I think there's going to have to be a higher level of empathy that, hey, your people in your business are working with a lot more pressure than they had before. Yeah. And I think that makes it a perfect opportunity to try to figure out, hey, how can we bring in some technology resources to take some of that pressure off them, to automate some of the work that they were doing manually, because they're under a lot of personal pressure when the economy gets tight. And then also, I think of just really taking a look at your business of what are we spending our time on? What is really adding value to the customers? Because the customer is going to pay you. They're going to be looking at what are we spending money on, and they're going to cut back on the things that aren't adding value. So if you're a law firm or an accounting firm just making sure what you do for them is value add, and then find ways to, communicate like, hey, here's the things that we're working on because we know that it impacts your business in this way. Because when, your customers realize that, hey, you are a value add to my business, they're more likely to pay you faster. And so when you start implementing that technology to automate, whether it's your billing or to automate the reminders of the collections, when they see your name pop up, they're going to associate it with value, and you're likely the one that they're going to pay first. And that will help protect your cash flow as well as protect your relationship with your clients.
I'm not even going to expand on that. I'm just going to say what he said, because I wholesale agree with everything you just said. And this is not the water cooler is not a bearish environment. We're all optimistic about how particularly kind of some of the forward-thinking firms are going to thrive going forward. I know your business is doing great, as is ours, but these are important considerations. And I love that, frankly, you led with the people consideration, because I know the firms that we work with, that's a paramount, vector of thought, right? Making sure they're both empowering and kind of incentivizing and insulating their people to do great work. So I think that's a critical component. Well, listen, you're a busy guy. Your clients need you. The water cooler is running out of water. Let's do a quick cheers. Thanks for joining. Terrell, great to see you. We'll talk again soon. Take care.